Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, inshallah, we're going to complete our talk about the consumer equilibrium under the indifference curve theory. I think that all of you have an idea about the indifference curve and the budget line. So, let's determine the equilibrium or the consumer equilibrium under the indifference curve theory. Suppose that we have the following graph. This is QY, QX, and this is the budget line. Suppose that we have three indifference curves. IC1, IC2, IC3, and we have different points or different combinations of X and Y. Point A, B, C, D, E. As you know that indifference curve 3 gives utility larger than IC2 than IC1, right? And suppose, or the budget line illustrates the ability for the consumer to buy different bundles of goods, right? So the budget line illustrates the ability or the capability for the consumer to buy different goods, and the indifference curves illustrates the taste and preferences for the consumer, okay, or the utility gain obtained for the consumer. So suppose that indifference curve 1 gives the consumer 50 utils, indifference curve 2 gives 60 utils, 70 utils, right? Okay, let's do a comparison between point B, A, C, D, B and A. At point B, the total utility gain for the consumer is, at B, is 50, right? And he pays, how much? Suppose that he pays a $100 to get 50 utils. So, suppose at point B, the consumer pays, or spends a $100 and he gets how much? 50 utils. At point A, the consumer pays how much? $100 and he gets how much? 60 utils. So at point A is better than B, because at A he spends $100 and he gets 60 utils. But at B he spends the same amount, the same income. He distributes all of his income to buy X and Y and he gets 50. So A is better than B. The same idea for between, or the distinction between A and D. So in this case, A is better than B. A is better than B. What about B and D? The same. At A, he spends $100 and he gets 60 utils. At D, he spends $100 and he gets 50. So A is better than D. A and C. So as you know that each point along IC3 gives larger utility than A, or the IC2 than IC1. Let's do a comparison between A. What about E? What about E?
We cannot reach.
Yes, excellent, Muhammad, because the consumer desires to reach this point, E, but he cannot reach it as a result of the limited income. If his income increased, yes, it's easy to get it or to reach it.
The prices decline from X and Y.
Yes, if the prices of X declined, the prices of Y declined, it's easy to get this point. So, which is the better or the best point for the consumer in this case? Point A. Because it's, in this case, the budget line tangent the highest indifference curve. Right? So, at this point, point B, or, yes, at point B, there is an intersection between indifference curve 1 and the budget line. At D, there is an intersection between the budget line and difference curve. Budget or point A, there is a tangency. It's called a tangency point, تماس, between indifference curve 2 and the budget line. So the best combination, the best bundle of goods for the consumer is the bundle A, because it gives him the highest utility under the limited income. Right? Okay. So, let's come back to this point, point A, and calculate the slope, or what about the slope? At this point, the slope of the budget line equals the slope of indifference curve. Right? But at point B, what's the situation? The slope of indifference curve is larger than the slope of budget line. Right? What about D? At point D, the slope of the budget line is larger than the slope of indifference curve. Right? So, the consumer equilibrium occurs or achieved when the slope of indifference curve equals the slope of the budget line, or when there is a tangency between indifference curve and the budget line. So, let's come back to the slope of indifference curve and the budget line. The slope of indifference curve. In the previous lecture, we calculated the slope of indifference curve, which is delta y over delta x equals MUX over MUY. This is the slope of the indifference curve. What about the slope of the budget line? The slope of budget line is delta y over delta x equals minus px over py. The equilibrium occurs when the slope of indifference curve equals the slope of the budget line. When this side equals this side, so this side, the right side must equal the right side in this formula. Yes?
We neglect the sign minus when calculate.
Yes, because in all cases, the slope of the budget line is negative, and the slope of indifference curve is always negative. So for sure the result would be negative, right? So in this case, MU x over MUY equals minus px over py. So the equilibrium occurs or achieved, or the consumer equilibrium achieved, when the slope of the indifference curve equals the slope of indifference of the budget line, right? Let's take a practical exercise to understand the idea, and then we are going to derive the demand curve, right? Okay. Suppose that the consumer income equals 20, the price of X equals 4, and the price of Y equals 2. Number one, derive and draw the budget line. The budget line. Number two, derive the budget line formula or equation. The budget line formula number three, suppose that the equilibrium or the consumer equilibrium occurs when he consumes 3 units of X. Calculate QY and explain the equilibrium using graph. If the consumer equilibrium occurs or happens or achieved when Qx equals to 3, calculate Qy and then explain the consumer equilibrium using graph. Explain the consumer equilibrium using graph. Number 4, let's answer these questions and then we can add more questions. So as you see, the given information are that the consumer income is $20 a day. The price of X, and he spends all of his income to buy two products, X and Y. The price of X equals 4, and the price of Y equals 2. The question is, derive the budget line. So to derive the budget line, we have Qx equals I over Px. 20 over 4 equals 5. Qy equals I over Py equals 20 over 2 equals 10. Right? So we are going, or let's draw the budget line. This is Qx, Qy, Qx. The budget line is at Y 10 and at X 5. This is the budget line. So if the consumer decided to use or to spend all of his income to buy only X, he can buy 5 units of X And if he decided to spend all of his income to buy only Y, he can buy 10 units of Y, right? Okay. The question is, number 2, derive, or if, where is it? Okay, derive the budget line formula. To derive the budget line formula, we have to calculate QY by X, by QX. So, I equals PXQX plus PYQY, right? We are going to, or let's calculate QY. So, PYQY equals I minus PXQX. So, QY equals I over PY. كله على الPY. So, in over PY minus PX over PY في QX. This is the budget line formula. But let's use the given information to write the requested budget line formula in this example. So QY equals I over PY 20 over 2 minus PX 4 over 2 QX. So QY equals 10 minus 2 QX. This is the budget line formula in this example. Or the intercept minus the slope times QX. QY equals the intercept with the vertical line minus the slope of the budget line times the QX. Number 3, if the consumer equilibrium occurs when QX equals 3, calculate QY and explain the consumer equilibrium using graph. To calculate the QY by using this formula equals 10 minus 2 times the 3 QX. QY equals 10 minus 6 equals 4. So let's come back to this diagram. The question said that suppose that the equilibrium occurs when the consumer consumes 3 units of X. So at 3 units of X, suppose it was here, 3 units of X. Then let's calculate QY. We have calculated QY 4. So this is the equilibrium. This is IC1 and E1. So the equilibrium occurs when there is a tangency between the indifference curve and the budget line, not the intersection, right? So in this case, I advise the consumer to buy 3 units of X and 4 units of Y, because in this case, he spends all of his income to get the highest utility, right? Okay. Number 4, calculate the slope of the budget line and indifference curve at equilibrium. بدنا نحسب السلوب عند الايكوليبريم او السلوب the slope of the budget line is constant at all cases, in all cases. So it's equals minus px over py. It's this part of the formula. It's minus 2, or the slope equals minus px over py, right? So the slope of budget line equals minus px over py. How much? Minus 4 over 2 equals minus 2. This is the slope of the budget line. And in this case, the slope of indifference curve at equilibrium must equal the slope of indifference curve. Right? So in this case, the slope of indifference curve equals how much? Yes, minus 2. The same. They are equal. Or equals. Right? Okay. Number 3. Or number 4. Or number 5. The question Suppose that the prices of X, or the price of X, decline to 2. Calculate or draw or derive the new budget line, and the budget line formula, as well as if the consumer equilibrium occurs or achieved when he consumes 7 units. Calculate the QY, and then let's derive the demand curve, right? So let's write the following example or exercise, the continuous questions. امسح هذا. Okay. So number 4 is calculate the slope of budget line. It's already calculated. Number 5, if the price of X decline to 2, income remains constant at 20, and PY equals 2, remains constant as well. The question is, derive the new budget line and draw it, the new budget line formula, as well as suppose that the equilibrium occurs, or let's write the question. A, calculate or derive the new budget line. B, derive the new budget line formula. C, if the new equilibrium achieved or occurs when Qx equals 7, calculate the new Qy and explain the new equilibrium. Calculate the new or Qy, the new Qy, and explain the equilibrium using diagram or graphs. The same process, the new Qx equals the new I over Px. I over Px. I is 20 over 2, not 4, because here we have a new price. So over 2 equals 10. The quantum y new equals I over Py. 20 over 2. There is no change in the quantum y, because there is no change in the quantum y or the price of y and the consumer income. So in this case we have a new budget line. The new budget line is illustrated by the new quantum x, to suppose it's 10, and the quantum y remains constant. This is the new budget line. Qx equals 10 here. This is Qx. And the question is, derive the new budget line formula. As you see, there is no change in the quantum y. It remains constant at 10. And the quantum x increased to 10. Right? What about the slope? Do a comparison between the slope of the budget line 1 and the budget line 2.
One larger than two.
One, the slope of yes, the slope of the budget line 1 is larger than the slope of the budget line 2. And let's calculate it after complete our the solution or deriving the budget line formula. Let's derive the budget line formula. The budget line formula, AQY equals I over PY minus PX over QX or PY QX. So the new budget line formula QY equals 20 over 2 minus price of X2 over price of Y, the new 2 QX. So QY equals 10 minus 1 QX. This is the new budget line formula. Right? This is the new budget line formula. So as you see, this is the slope or the new slope. It's smaller than the previous one. And the previous one, it was 2, or the absolute value of the slope is 2. And here it is 1. Right? So it's small, the slope of this line, or the new curve, the new budget line, is smaller than the previous one. Right? Okay. The question is, if the new equilibrium occurs when QX equals 7, calculate the QY and explain the equilibrium using graph. So QY equals 10 minus 1 times 7. So QY equals 10 minus 7 equals the 3. So the question is, when a QX equals 7, how much is QY? 3. So here we have the new equilibrium. This is the new equilibrium point. This is IC2 and E2. Right? Okay? Is there a problem so far? Okay. We have another question, which is, derive the demand curve for the product X. Derive the demand curve for the product X. To derive the demand curve, we have prices of X, quantity demanded of X, and then we can draw the demand. The question is, calculate or derive the demand curve. Derive the demand curve. So to derive the demand curve for the product X, we must have different points for the product, the prices of product X and the quantity demanded for the product X. Price of X, quantity demanded of X. In the first case, for the question, the price of X was how much? 4. And the quantity demanded was how much? 3. Now, when the price of X declined to 2, the quantity achieved the equilibrium was 7. Or is 7. So, let's draw the demand curve. For the product X. The price of X, the quantity demanded of X. The price of X, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When the price of X equals 4, the quantity demanded of X equals 3. 4, and the 3 and 2 and 7. This is the demand curve. Yes. Sorry? Yes, according to our assumption, the exercise or the example, the question was, suppose that the prices of X decline to 2, from 4 to 2. You can come back to the exercise in your table or your notebook. Now, calculate the price elasticity of demand. I think it's easy. And determine if. What about TR, the total revenue for the producer, if he decided to increase the prices or decrease the prices? I think it's easy to analyze and to take a proper decision, right? Tamam? Okay. Let's go to, or suppose that the prices of X, this will continue for the previous exercise or the current exercise. Suppose that the prices of or the quantum of X that determined or achieved the equilibrium was 8. How much is the quantum X? It would be lower than 3. 2? Okay, 2. If the price of or the quantity of X that maximize the total utility for the consumer or achieve the equilibrium was the 3.
7.
How much is the quantity of Y? Direct substitution in the formula, QY equals how much? 10 minus 1 QX. QY equals 10 minus 1 times 3 equals 7, right? This is 7. So here, the new equilibrium would be at this point. Here we have a tangency between the indifference curve and the budget line, right? Okay. If we connect A1 with A2, this line is called the price consumption line. بيسموه خط الاستهلاك السعري. Which means no. Because in this case, the price of X declined and then the consumption of X increased. So when the price of X declined, the consumption of X increased. So it's called, this line from A1 to A2 is called the price consumption line. تمام؟ طيب, suppose that the consumer income increased. In this case, there is a rightward shifting of the budget line because the consumer ability to buy has increased. صح? So in this case, there is a rightward shifting for the budget line. Smooth? Okay. So suppose that the consumer income increased from 20 to 26. Suppose that the consumer income suppose that the consumer income increased to 26. The price of X remains constant at 4 and the price of Y remains constant at 2. Px equals 4, Py equals 2. I draw the budget line or the new budget line. and the same, yes, the same requested information. The origin budget line is 10 QY, QX, how much? 10, 5. Derive the new budget line. Derive? And what is the previous or the origin equilibrium? 3, yes.
So 3 of x for 4.
3 units of x and how much? 4 units of y. This is the origin equilibrium. IC1, E1. Now, according to our assumption that there is an increasing in the consumer income, which means increasing his ability to buy different bundles of X and Y when the prices are constant. Yes, yes, yes. So in this case, there is a full shifting or a rightward shifting of the budget line, parallel to the previous one, or the original budget line. So in this case, the new quantum X equals how much? 26 over 4. How much? 6.5. QY equals 26 over 2 equals how much? 13. So in this case, 6.5, it would be a parallel shifting. 6.5, 13. Suppose that the new equilibrium occurs when the consumer consumes 5 units or 4 units of X. How much? The quantity of Y. قديش بيشتري من الواي؟ At 4, he can buy how much of Y? We have to derive the budget line formula. By the budget line formula, direct QY equals the intercept, the new intercept, 13, صح? 13 minus PX over PY. PX 4 over 2 minus 2. QX. So in this case, when QX equals 4, QY equals 13 minus 2 times 4. QY equals 13 minus 8, how much? 5. So in this case, the quantity of Y is 5. So we have a new tangency between indifference curve and budget line. This is IC2. E2, right? The points or the line between E1 to E2 is called what? خط الاستهلاك الدخلي, or the income consumption line. The income consumption line was because the consumer income or the consumption has increased of X and Y as a result of the increasing of the consumer income. So it's called the consumer or the income consumption line between E1 to E2, right? Okay. Let's go to chapter 5, which is the producer behavior. The producer behavior is similar to the rational, or the rational producer behavior is similar to the rational consumer behavior. As we mentioned before that, or when we discussed the behavior of the consumer, satisfaction or utility when he consumes different bundles of goods, right? For the producer, he has two main goals or objectives. As you know that all the products, the cheese, tables, etc., needs inputs to be produced, right? So the production process is what? We have inputs and outputs. The production process is the conversion of inputs to outputs. Inputs maybe include labor, raw materials, machines, capital, land, and so on. So all these factors, it's called inputs in the production process. We convert or use all these combinations or these inputs to produce outputs, right? And when we talk about inputs, for sure we're talking about cost, right? And when we talk about outputs, for sure we're talking about benefits, right? Okay, so the consumer, the producer, the rational the producer, or the main goal of for the rational producer is to maybe to maximize output by using the same inputs, or to minimize the cost or using inputs and to produce the same outputs. So suppose that the producer decided, or the producer uses 2 laborers plus 5 machines, and they give him 100 tons of clothes of wheat. He has 2 objectives. Number 1, to maximize his outputs, maybe to be 120 tons, by using the same inputs, 2L plus 5 machines. This is the one of his objectives. So the first objective is to increase or to maximize the output by using the same inputs, or to produce the same outputs by using smaller inputs. So the second objective maybe is to minimize or to keep the same outputs, 100 tons, by using maybe 1 labor plus the 3 machines. So in this case, it's called cost minimization. Okay, cost minimization to produce the same outputs, right? Okay, we have another term related to the production, which is the production technology. The production technology. The production technology. Some industries rely on labor heavily instead of capital, and other industries depend on capital instead of labor. So we have 2 types of the production technology. The first one is called the labor intensive technology, like the agricultural planting sector. And the planting sector, they depend on what? On labor instead of machines. They rely on labor heavily instead of machines. So they like a planting sector. We have another term which is the capital intensive technology. In this case, the industries depend or rely on capital heavily instead of machines. Oh, sorry, human labor. So, like the high technology, like producing mobiles, computers, and electronics, like the computer industries. Or, okay, يعطيكم العافية، شكرا كثير.